In 1762, French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau wrote, "Man is born free, yet everywhere he is in chains," commenting on the condition of humanity evolving from a state of nature into modern-day society. 265 years later, in a parallel observation on the condition of common laboring people today, we might ask, if working man and working women's labor is the primary source of wealth in society, why do they have so little to show for this labor? Why is that?
Semillas Community Center is a working-class think tank and action center. We have a plan, sowing the seeds of transformation.
Why is that? And what can be done to finally overcome this? There has been a phenomenal expansion of wealth and billionaires in the U.S., based in good part on the productivity of American labor. Workers produce so much more today than 20 years ago, yet the share of wealth going to labor has steadily shrunk over the past 50 years. In fact, this is referred to as the K-shaped economy today, where the incomes of the top keep increasing and the income of the workers shrinks. And even socialist China, the second largest economy in the world, has become a superpower on the backs of very cheap labor force that also struggles to survive economically today. And this deteriorating condition of labor has become a source of great alienation and social discontent among people everywhere. And AI technology and robotization portends to displace millions upon millions of workers in the upcoming years. 265 years after Rousseau's famous statement, are we still said to be bound by chains of our own making? Why is that? And what can be done to finally overcome this? In part one of this four-part series, Semillas, a working-class think tank, examined what we see are the primary problems confronting working people. And we asserted that they are war and national debt sponsored by the nation's ruling elites. And as a community-based think tank, we laid out our general orientation towards creating a path forward for America's working people. And in episode 2, we proposed the need for a political divorce between America's working class and its ruling class over irreconcilable differences. Today, we focus on the need to create an alternative economic structure that can improve the quality of life for America's working people. And this alternative economy will be funded in part by scrapping America's war economy, a swords to plowshares policy that will end 80 years of continual conflict. Life in America begins for many of us each morning at 6 a.m. Get on the freeway, commute 90 minutes to work, clock in at 8, clock out at 5, another 90 minutes to get back home. That's one half of your entire life. And what did you do? Was it meaningful work or was it just meaningless? How many of you actually worked on providing basic needs required to sustain ourselves, as opposed to what some critics call BS jobs, pushing paper or making meaningless junk? But then that's better than getting laid off and spending months looking for a replacement job, right? Modernization has brought about a mass division of labor where you are just a meaningless, tiny little clog in the whole production process. Many of us lack meaningful work where we can be proud that our labor is contributing towards providing the things we need to survive. And a lack of meaningful work makes humans disaffected and alienated. This is the source of many of our social problems today, like drug abuse. The condition of labor today, on a spectrum, the condition of labor is somewhere between wage slavery on one end and meaningful work on the other. And you can place your own condition on this spectrum. It's somewhere in between there, right? But again, we ask, do you really work? Let's be frank. If we were to define work as performing those tasks required to sustain and reproduce ourselves, work required to produce the basic necessities of life, food, housing, basic products needed, I think we can all agree that our society has created this monstrous consumption apparatus where many of us are working on lots and lots of things we don't really need. In fact, only about 1/3 of all workers in the United States work on things essential for daily life. In fact, if we all worked on things linked to providing our essential daily needs, we really wouldn't need to work 8 hours or more a day, 5 days a week. So much of our economic system must be questioned. Do we really need a $1.5 trillion annual defense budget for more wars? In California, we have a bullet train to nowhere that is now estimated to cost over $200 billion. Then there are the endless fads private industry convinces us we all need, millions upon millions of things that we have convinced ourselves we need. The irony is that Americans work more hours than most other workers living in advanced economies throughout the world. But why and for what? On the other hand, there are the chronically unemployed, many living on welfare entitlements, even though we need to import millions of laborers to work here. Our point? We spend a whole lot of money, including tax money, on things we really don't need. Economist John Maynard Keynes once remarked that the government could basically run a program to pay people to dig ditches and refill them up at the end of every day just to keep the economy going. But I don't think most taxpayers would agree with this idea, even though that's much of what our government and private sector spending is pretty much doing today, digging ditches and filling them up again. The point being made is that under the current system, we work way too many hours, earn less and less. We're all stuck on a giant hamster treadmill, running and running, going nowhere. But Semillas wants to assert that with a little creative thinking on the part of working people, the people who actually do the work in the first place, we could create some meaningful economic alternatives. So what are our options? Again, let's look at the two ends of a spectrum here, which are dependency on one side, where you have meaningless wage slavery and helplessness, and autarky would be on the other end. Autarky. This is a very interesting sounding word, isn't it? Autarky means complete self-sufficiency. So you have dependency on one end versus self-sufficiency on the other, where you live off the grid, economically independent since you're part of a system that builds its own housing, grows its food, makes clothing, and all the other things we need to survive. Truly independiente. In reality, you probably see that this is something highly improbable to accomplish, especially on a society-wide basis, because we do need division of labor since we can't do it all individually. But we should recognize autarky as an ideal. Being a more self-sufficient family and community should be the goal for all of us. So even if true autarky is improbable, we can look at examples that make working people more independent, so we can think about doing things to liberate our own lives. Again, the purpose of this video is to show that there is a basis to create an alternative economy for working people that provides improvements to our lives. And think about it. What happens if the economy collapses or robots take away most of our jobs? There's no plan B, is there? So let's look at a couple of examples of working people creating successful alternatives for survival. For example, let's look at the Amish religious faith. You've probably seen photos of them in their horse-drawn carriages since they do not believe in using many of our modern-day conveniences, including cars and even electricity. The Amish, based around the states of Pennsylvania and Ohio, provide us with profound ideas regarding self-sufficiency. They focus on providing their own food, housing, skills development, making products they need, and exchanging those products with each other. This is something America's working class could learn much from. The Amish, as a community collaborating together, are able to sustain themselves economically toward autarky. Most are not rich, yet they produce the basic needs required for survival, and in an independent way. In fact, one could say that they are truly free. By rejecting the excessive material needs that society tells us we must have, the Amish have found a path towards human liberation. The Amish evolved out of the Protestant Reformation hundreds of years ago, Anabaptists with a fundamental belief that labor is intrinsic to one's worshiping of God. The Amish show that there is a strong spiritual component to labor. We worship through our work. We work not because we are paid, but because labor is part of our spiritual essence. Work is a component part of human liberation. This is a notion that many of us have largely become detached from today. In fact, in the United States, labor is looked upon as something debased, as low class, and it's solely for the purpose of being able to enrich, to buy, crass consumption. The Amish, on the other hand, make the things necessary for their families to thrive using hard work. Even the little children have lots of chores as part of this cooperative endeavor, and they interchange goods with other families so that they are agricultural producers, product makers, home builders. They end up comprising an alternative, independent economic system for its members. If the U.S. economic system of capitalism were to break down, the Amish would probably not even feel the impact. Artificial intelligence and robots may wipe out our jobs, but not for the Amish. Today, Amish numbers continue to grow and are nearing 500,000 people. Imagine if we had lots of community experiments like this throughout the nation, where the goal would be more autarky, independence, and a greater commitment to spirituality in our daily endeavors. And imagine how much more possible this is for you if you want to use modern day technology to help become more autarkic, something the Amish reject due to their religious values. So here is one example of Semillas' motto, Independiente. On a more modern footing is the Mondragon system of cooperatives, serving the Basque Country in northwest Spain. Today, this association of cooperatively run enterprises employs around 80,000 persons. These cooperatives are businesses that produce everything from food to manufactured goods, finance, and education. But there is no one individual or corporate owner. These businesses are owned by the actual people who do the work. They are cooperatively owned. While the Amish emerged from the spiritual awakening of the Protestant Reformation, Mondragon originated out of the total destruction of war, from a people's complete devastation and defeat at the hands of General Franco in the Spanish Civil War from 1936 to 1939, where Hitler's Nazi army aided in destroying the Basque countryside. As a matter of fact, Picasso's painting, Guernica, is a tribute to the mass slaughter experienced by the Basque at the hands of the German Air Force. The war left the people and the countryside devastated. They had to start from ground zero. What could they do to survive? What they did have were deep cultural values that, like the spiritual values of the Amish, helped create the Mondragon cooperatives. Establishing a technical training school, separate enterprises were developed that focused on providing basic goods that the community needed. This created income that was reinvested into expanding more enterprises. Soon they had factories, food markets, even a community bank to help finance other enterprises, all owned and operated by the workers themselves. Today, the Mondragon cooperatives are one of the largest examples of cooperative, worker-owned industry in the world. Again, imagine if we had institutions like this all over our nation to provide working people a positive example of what can be accomplished, a true alternative using our own labor, our own initiative. You see that in both of our cases, the Amish and the Mondragon cooperatives, the essentials of real alternative economics is taking control and providing the elements required to sustain and reproduce ourselves. The basic elements: food, housing, clothing, various consumer items, transportation, education, healthcare. Here in the United States, one of the richest nations on earth, all we really require to do this is the conscious awakening to the need to be more self-sufficient and the willingness to reach out to others who think the same. Unfortunately, we don't have the religious values of the Amish, nor the ancient cultural ties of the Basque. Workers in America will need to adapt values like cooperation and collaboration that are not necessarily driving forces in our society today. Many workers, especially the youth, lack the values created by having a strong work ethic. The U.S. working class is complacent and conformist. Our problem here is exaggerated individualism and narcissism, something that is core to our national identity. That prevents us from joining together, like, for instance, the workers from Mondragon did, facing an emergency. Our grandparents' generation had a better understanding of this need to collaborate and cooperate in the interest of the larger community's well-being. Today, we need to acknowledge that we face an emergency on many levels that requires that we dig deep inside to find the values that will help turn things around. In the beginning stages, you will need to reach out to like-minded community members that understand the urgency of this moment. You will need to stand up as leaders in your community, starting wherever you can to find people willing to listen, your church, your kids' sports teams, and especially within our families and extended families. And this is why Semillas has been established. Semillas urges that we start to stand up for our working class interests, politically and economically, not the interests and values of the 1%, the ruling class that owns and runs everything here. Our slogan, Independiente, calls for we, the laboring people, the vast majority of our society, to become more conscious of our needs and interests. Political independence from the two-party system and economic independence from the corporate control over production. In our last episode, we covered our view on gaining political independence. Economically, we advocate two paths for you. One, commit to self-improvement. Expand you and your family's skill sets. Learn to make and fix things, and adopt a focus on continuous learning. Grow food, preserve food, exchange it, barter your skills, products, and services. Think about simple micro enterprises that you and your kids can start in your own garage or community space. Second, think about community transformation by creating an organization of like-minded members in your community, where community needs are the focus, where new leaders are encouraged to run for local office with the goal of reorganizing our city and school governments to further the development of the alternative economy. What people don't know is that local government subsidizes big business and special interests just like our state and federal governments do. Semillas is saying, take control of your tax dollars and make sure these funds are spent for the maintenance and improvement of the working class and the creation of an alternative economy. So as you can see, there are lots of potential things that you can begin to think about doing. At Semillas, for instance, we're working to develop a makerspace, which is sort of a community-based laboratory where we can hope to provide job skills development and product development ideas that would become new community-run businesses in the future. Semillas is producing this 4-part video series, for instance, and many other productions as educational and training guides, just like the workers from Mondragon did to prepare their communities decades ago. And we want you to feel free to contact us. Wherever you are, if we can lend your efforts a hand. Our hope is that we can communicate with all like-minded people to help sow the seeds of transformation. We are guided by a sense of urgency, which we hope also motivates you to assist in this effort. You have great potential to change your local environment, and in doing so, you help to change the national and global landscape. And Semillas wants to work with you to accomplish this. Please like and subscribe to our channel. Contact us and help us financially in growing this worker-sponsored enterprise. Thank you.